During the Hunter recruitment, candidates, especially students who have just graduated from the Hunter Academy, take part in the selection process to become hunters while also being scouted by various guilds. Lee Hyun-suk, however, is not a graduate of the Hunter Academy, so naturally everyone, including the Academy graduates, looks down on him. But when the trial begins, Lee Hyun-suk easily defeats everyone, including the Academy's top student, who gets completely wrecked and receives the full gender equality treatment from him. The reason behind Lee Hyun-suk's overwhelming performance is simple. He secretly trained for 50 years in another world, becoming the strongest warrior and eventually its hero. So naturally, everyone is left shocked by his performance. Even the top-ranked hunters begin showing interest in him, wondering just how someone like Lee Hyun-suk could possess such ridiculous strength. To understand how this happened, the story skips back to the final moments before his reincarnation. After defeating the Demon King of this world, most protagonists would be excited about finally completing their Isekai mission, but Lee Hyun-suk isn't happy at all. Instead, he suddenly turns to the Demon King and his party members and reveals that he already knows everything. The Saintess who claims to love him has simply been using him. She plans to kill him because he is a human from another world. As for the knight, he has already been paid off by the Emperor to eliminate Lee Hyun-suk the moment the Demon King dies. The same goes for the mage in their party. The old man simply hates him because Lee Hyun-suk opposes the idea of slavery. Basically, our protagonist has known from the very beginning that these people hated him from the moment he arrived in this world. And honestly, he's just tired. Bro absolutely hates this godforsaken world. Lee Hyun-suk explains that he was once an ordinary office worker before the Isekai gods dragged his soul into this world. Aside from killing monsters and training to defeat the Demon King, Lee Hyun-suk has spent 80 years witnessing just how unbearably cruel this world is. They would rather let a weak and innocent child die simply because they claim they need to conserve resources. Then there are the terrible medical practices. A man is literally about to have his limb amputated because of a simple infection. And as if that wasn't bad enough, there's the church. They strongly believe that people who survived having their hometowns destroyed by demons are remnants of demonic influence and must be exorcised by burning them. After everything he has endured, Lee Hyun-suk is completely exhausted. So, after completing his mission, he calls for the goddess and reminds her of their agreement. When she appears from the sky, she praises him for his achievements. But our protagonist isn't having any of it. Lee Hyun-suk knows the goddess never truly liked him either, so he immediately demands to be sent back to Earth with all his memories and skills intact. Hearing this, the goddess pretends to be sad. Still, she agrees and honors their agreement. However, there is one problem. His original body on Earth has been dead for a long time. Because of this, the goddess decides to place his soul inside a new vessel. Honestly, Lee Hyun-suk doesn't care what body he gets. Anything waiting for him on Earth has to be better than this godforsaken world. So, when Lee Hyun-suk opens his eyes again, he finds himself back on Earth. That damned other world has put him through 80 years of endless suffering. At last, he has returned to the world he once called home. Unfortunately, his new body belongs to nothing more than a teenage boy named Yoo Chan-suk. Still, Lee Hyun-suk couldn't care less. He walks into the kitchen and turns on the faucet. Clean water immediately flows out, completely free from the pollution and impurities he had grown accustomed to in the other world. Then, with nothing more than a simple press, he produces fire. To our protagonist, this is true supreme magic. The mages of that other world can all go to hell. Just then, a familiar smell hits him. Our protagonist immediately starts drooling at the sight of KFC. He can't believe it has been so long since he last ate chicken. The moment he takes a bite, the familiar texture and taste nearly bring tears to his eyes. This is what food is supposed to taste like. During the 80 years he spent struggling in that other world, he never once managed to enjoy a proper meal. Now, at long last, he is back on Earth, and he can finally live like an ordinary person again. Unfortunately, he fails to notice the eerie red glow shining outside his window. Afterward, Lee Hyun-suk heads into the bathroom and enjoys a long, comfortable shower. Despite being completely out of touch with the current state of Earth, he believes a peaceful and beautiful life is finally within reach. Then, without warning, a monster suddenly appears beside his window. Lee Hyun-suk reacts in shock, completely caught off guard. Before he can even process what he has seen, a broadcast suddenly sounds from behind him. An emergency announcement is being issued to all residents. A corrosion rift has appeared inside the apartment complex, and everyone is ordered to evacuate to the underground shelter immediately. Our protagonist is completely confused. He has no idea what a corrosion rift is or what has happened to Earth. To him, the warning announcement almost sounds like it is being broadcast in a completely different language. Then he sees something that makes his scalp tingle. Several humanoid monsters are crawling across the window in a dense swarm. A moment later, the window shatters and the monsters charge inside. Lee Hyun-suk immediately turns around and runs. It becomes painfully obvious that the Earth he remembers is no longer the Earth that exists today. Before anything else, he needs to understand what happened during his absence. But first, he needs to escape. Lee Hyun-suk hangs outside the window to avoid the swarm. Once the monsters move away, he carefully climbs back through the window. He lets out a sigh when he finally loses them. However, at that moment, he spots a kid as he plans to head toward the underground shelter. Naturally, he warns the boy and insists that they head to the shelter. Unfortunately, the kid has a completely different plan. The boy wants to hunt the monsters. Our protagonist simply tags along. Since the kid keeps insisting on killing monsters, Lee Hyun-seok can't possibly let him wander around and do it alone. At the same time, he uses the opportunity to learn what has happened to Earth. From the kid's explanation, Lee Hyun-seok learns about the corrosion rifts. Earth has already been living with this disaster for 13 years. Corrosion rifts are mysterious openings through which monsters emerge. Nobody knows how they are created, nor does anyone know where or when the next one will appear. Our protagonist becomes a little frustrated. He fought desperately for 80 years just to return to Earth. Yet somehow Earth has become another hell. Lee Hyun-seok also learns from the kid that there are people who fight these monsters. They are called hunters. One of them happens to be Lee Seon, a member of the Janabi Guild. She is ranked 10th in the world and happens to be the kid's favorite hunter. People fighting monsters isn't anything new to our protagonist. However, he still wonders why something like this is happening on Earth. The kid is about to explain further, but our protagonist suddenly shuts him up. It turns out he has spotted monsters ahead. Lee Hyun-seok counts 5 of them, but he believes there are actually 6, with one hiding somewhere nearby. Thankfully, he has a strong body along with the experience he gained from fighting multiple enemies in his previous life. But there is one real problem. What is he supposed to do with the kid? The boy was confident just moments ago, but now he is trembling like a leaf. In the middle of his thoughts, our protagonist suddenly senses a familiar energy. Lee Hyun-seok immediately recognizes it as mana. It is the same energy that exists in the other world. Suddenly, one of the monsters is engulfed in black flames. Our protagonist realizes that he doesn't possess the 20 years worth of mana he accumulated in the previous world. However, as long as there is mana in the air, he can still use his Paradox Flame skill, which is engraved into his soul. The kid's eyes light up. He is amazed and praises our protagonist, never imagining that Lee Hyun-seok possesses a unique skill. Lee Hyun-seok decides to go along with the idea, figuring that this is probably what people on Earth call such abilities. But in the very next second, the kid rushes forward. He declares that they should finish off the monster, just like it was shown in an online video tutorial. Unfortunately, one of the monsters suddenly lunges at him. Thankfully, our protagonist reacts in time. He saves the kid before suggesting to the terrified boy that he should probably stop watching those videos. Suddenly, multiple monsters emerge from nowhere. Our protagonist easily deals with them, using the kid's staff as his weapon. Once again, the kid is amazed and asks if Lee Hyun-seok is secretly a hunter. Meanwhile, our protagonist feels irritated, not because of the kid, but because he now has to deal with the very same kind of trouble he thought he had left behind in the previous world. The next scene shifts to the underground shelter. Our protagonist walks inside, still irritated, while the kid follows closely behind. Just then, a woman suddenly shouts the kid's name. The woman turns out to be the child's mother, and she profusely thanks our protagonist for keeping her son safe. Our protagonist's brain immediately begins working as he notices the woman's designer clothes. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the woman is rich, but at that moment his thoughts are suddenly interrupted. Apparently, a monster has breached the defenses and entered the underground shelter. Normally, people would immediately begin running for their lives. The kid tells our protagonist to run because this monster is far stronger than the ones he faced earlier. Lee Hyun-seok doesn't respond. He is too lost in his thoughts. Then he suddenly turns to the kid and asks an important question. The boy pauses when our protagonist asks why he wants to become a hunter when he is rich and can simply live a comfortable life. That's when the kid reveals the reason. He lost his father during a corrosion rift incident when a monster killed him inside an underground shelter. The boy tells Lee Hyun-seok that there is nowhere safe on Earth. That is why he wants to become a hunter and save the world from the corrosion rifts. The boy admits that it probably sounds stupid, but our protagonist simply shakes his head. In the next second, he suddenly teleports. Both mother and son watch in shock as he effortlessly kills the monster. Our protagonist then tells the two of them that he will save the world. Because for someone like him, saving the world is simply a job he has already done before. Despite Lee Hyun-seok's promise to the kid that he will save the world for the second time, that motivation quickly dies because, just like us, he easily becomes a gaming gooner. The reason is simple. Our brother simply lacks the motivation to save the world a second time. But that is about to change. The moment he checks his phone, he realizes in shock that his bank account balance is almost empty. He explains that Chanseok was originally a logistics worker, but his company went bankrupt because of the corrosion rift. Our protagonist has already exhausted his severance pay, and to make matters worse, he cannot find another job despite already trying. Just as he wonders what he is supposed to do while complaining about his situation, his phone screen suddenly lights up with a hunter recruitment notification. And so the next scene takes us to the Hunters Association. Today happens to be the hunter selection examination. People are gathered everywhere, but one guy seems completely unimpressed by the crowd. To him, they are nothing more than a bunch of small fries. In the middle of this, someone suddenly bumps into him. Like any background character, He is about to rage out, but the moment he turns around, he freezes in shock. The person who bumped into him happens to be Lee Seon from the Janabi Guild. We already know that she is ranked 10th in the world, so everyone is shocked to see her attending the recruitment examination as an observer. Meanwhile, inside the arena, she and her team are going over the potential candidates for their guild. One of the candidates catches her attention, but she jokes about the girl's unique ability, lightning, saying it is probably just a battery saver. Her subordinate is left speechless because the girl happens to be the top student at the Hunter Academy. Anyway, during their conversation, one of her subordinates reveals that hunting corrosion rifts involves real combat. This is even more important for graduates, since they need actual field experience. Of course, Lee Seon supports the idea and rewards him with a candy. She thinks to herself that practice and real-life combat are completely different. There have even been cases where top graduates from the Hunter Academy nearly lose themselves when faced with real danger and actual monsters. The moment the announcement for the test begins, Lee Seon starts looking forward to the potential candidates she can recruit. And the first person to be called happens to be our protagonist. He walks out looking awkward because he is still not familiar with his new name. His opponent is a recent graduate from the Hunter Academy. And of course, like any character who is about to get his ass kicked, the guy immediately looks down on him. Well, it is understandable. Our protagonist never attended the academy. He is simply a worker who got laid off. The moment the referee signals the start of the match, Naruto from Temu rushes forward excitedly, thinking he can beat our protagonist with ease while declaring himself the undefeated spearmaster of the Hunter Academy. In response, our protagonist simply vanishes. The guy is left completely stunned. Our protagonist suddenly appears beside him and casually notes how clumsy the fool is. Before the guy can react, Lee Hyun-seok delivers a Mike Tyson punch straight to his gut, immediately following it with a jaw-shattering uppercut. Bro almost loses consciousness on the spot. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun-seok is shocked to discover that the guy is surprisingly weak. If he had actually used his spear, Bro might have received a free economy class ticket to the afterlife. Lee Hyun-seok thinks that if this guy is supposedly undefeated, then the rest of the candidates are low-key trash. Lee Seon is equally shocked by what she sees. She cannot believe that our protagonist was previously a logistics worker with no formal training whatsoever. Not to mention, her subordinate adds that our protagonist has no mana and did not use any during the fight. He is about to say something else, but she tosses another candy at him. He immediately gets the hint. She is basically telling him to shut up. Lee Seon simply observes what we already know and watches the match intently. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun-seok thinks it is a bit uncomfortable to have his abilities tested like this. Nonetheless, he moves forward and finishes the guy with one decisive punch. Bro loses a tooth and gets knocked out cold as our protagonist is declared the winner. During this, Lee Seon notices the other scouts evaluating him. After thinking it over, she decisively decides to make her move. While the other scouts from different guilds are thinking about evaluating him further, she decides to go see her guild president. Meanwhile, our boy continues dominating every rookie and fresh graduate from the Hunter Academy, using nothing but brute strength. At one point, he genuinely wonders what exactly they are teaching these kids at the Hunter Academy. Not a single one of them is giving him a hard time. Eventually, he faces the one everyone is waiting for. The girl happens to be Han Senga, the very girl Lee Seon joked about earlier because of her lightning ability. Lee Hyun-seok observes her carefully and immediately realizes that she is built differently from the rest. In response, she throws a jab at him, pointing out that he has no mana and that his previous victories were nothing more than a fluke. Lee Hyun-seok scratches his head, wondering if all the students from the Hunter Academy are taught the same generic lines and trained to look down on other people. Activating her power, Han Sanga declares that she will not go easy on him. When she mentions a unique skill, our protagonist thinks she is referring to his Amaterasu. However, that would be extremely bad, because that is the ability he used to kill the Demon King. Han Sanga gets into her stance and amplifies her lightning. She launches her attack. However, our protagonist easily dodges it. Naturally, she is shocked that he managed to dodge her lightning blade. In mid-air, our protagonist analyzes her attack. Electricity is running through her weapon, turning it into a magnetic force. She uses that force to accelerate her weapon like a railgun. He lands safely and admits that she is different from the rest. However, he also notices that she is missing something. The girl looks confused, so our protagonist points out that he is talking about her previous attack. He explains that for Han Senga to accelerate her strike, she lays down a magnetic rail in the empty air. However, he mocks her for being an idiot because this makes her attack straightforward and predictable. That is exactly why he was able to dodge it. Irritated, she tells him not to get cocky before unleashing another lightning attack. Lee Hyun-seok calls her an idiot once again, pointing out that he already dodged her most powerful attack. There is no way he is going to get hit by these weaker ones. This makes her even more furious. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun-seok senses that she is losing her composure and her mana is beginning to flare up. He realizes that this could actually harm her. He admits that the girl is amazing, but he needs to stop her before she hurts herself. Before knocking her out, he tells her to raise her left hand if it hurts later. And just like that, our protagonist easily knocks her out. Purely out of respect, our protagonist gives her the gender equality treatment. And just like that, she drops to the ground. The scouts from the other guilds are left in complete shock after witnessing the #1 student from the Hunter Academy get defeated so easily. Lee Hyun-suk walks away while farming aura. He notes that for Hansanga to go down this easily, she must rely almost entirely on mana and have neglected her physical training. Suddenly, the girl raises her left arm for our protagonist to see. Our protagonist is completely caught off guard that she actually did it. Meanwhile, the referee receives urgent news and announces that the tournament schedule has changed. Our protagonist is surprised when he is told to take a short break. That is because he has a special match coming up. No one expects what happens next. Lee Si-eun herself has made sudden arrangements to test our protagonist. When she suggests having a match with him, she explains that he is free to refuse the offer. Our protagonist immediately breaks into a cold sweat. She is completely different from the other candidates, and her aura alone makes it obvious that she is the real deal. He is not confident that he can win, but at the same time, he has no intention of backing down. Our protagonist agrees to fight her right away, catching even the referee by surprise. He thinks to himself that this is the only way to get the best possible result from the evaluation. This time, he decides to fight with his weapon, and so the two instantly erupt into a fierce battle. Their clash leaves the entire audience stunned into silence. Even the referee has sweat forming on his forehead, completely at a loss for how to commentate on the fight. At that moment, Lee Hyun-seok blocks another of Lee Si-eun's attacks, but there is not the slightest hint of relief on his face. He can feel it clearly. This woman is incredibly strong, so strong that she is almost on his level. Nevertheless, he manages to parry her strike, forcing her to retreat several steps. Yet Lee Si-eun remains completely at ease. She has only been testing Lee Hyun-seok's limits and has yet to reveal her true strength. Compared to the beginning of the battle, Lee Hyun-seok's speed has already dropped noticeably. After being locked in combat with this S-rank hunter for so long, fatigue is finally beginning to show on his face. Meanwhile, Lee Si-eun is genuinely excited. It has been a long time since she has encountered someone like him. Although Lee Hyun-seok is still not on the same level as her, there is no denying that the word strong suits him perfectly. Then Lee Si-eun moves, deciding to end the fight. Lee Hyun-seok immediately realizes how bad his situation is. Not only is his body exhausted, but he also has almost no mana stored up. To make matters worse, there is only a small amount of mana remaining in the air around him. He has no time to figure things out, as Lee Si-eun suddenly charges through the air, bringing down an overhead strike. Faced with the incoming attack, Lee Hyun-suk instinctively activates his paradox flames. He narrowly dodges the strike. Boom! The attack crashes into the ground, leaving behind a massive crater. Lee Hyun-seok quickly creates some distance between them, while Lee Si-eun looks surprised that he manages to dodge her attack at the very last second. Then she notices the black flames radiating from his body. Naturally, she wants to know what she is seeing. Lee Hyun-seok explains that his black flames can burn a specific concept that he designates. However, he cannot simply burn or sacrifice something as significant as his own life or memories. In other words, the concept he can sacrifice right now is his fatigue. Lee Si-eun still cannot understand how he manages to recover so quickly. The fight continues. In the middle of the battle, Lee Si-eun suddenly notices a strange fluctuation in the mana surrounding them. Of course, it is related to Lee Hyun-seok's skill. His paradox flames function like an endless cycle, burning a designated concept to produce mana, while simultaneously using that mana to sustain the flames. Once again, Lee Si-eun delivers another powerful strike. This time, the impact creates an even larger crater. When the dust finally settles, Lee Hyun-seok is still standing. That is because his skill is best suited for prolonged battles, and now Lee Si-eun is beginning to get somewhat irritated. The match continues for 4 entire hours. In the end, Lee Hyun-seok only loses because his flames, like any other fire, require fuel. Once that fuel runs out, the flames naturally disappear. Meanwhile, Lee Si-eun's subordinates are completely shocked. The reason is that after the battle, Lee Si-eun hands Lee Hyun-seok a lollipop along with her business card. She suggests that they talk and discuss other matters later. And just like that, the selection trial comes to an end. Later, Lee Hyun-seok finds himself at the Hunter Association, staring at Lee Si-eun's business card. During his time there, he also learns that monster byproducts have become useful resources in the modern economy. Just then, someone suddenly approaches him. The huge man remarks that Lee Hyun-seok looks even better in person than he does on camera. Lee Hyun-seok thinks to himself that the man is easily over 2 meters tall as he accepts his business card. Looking at it, he discovers that the man is Yoon Seong-hyun, a hunter from the Taeke Guild. Lee Hyun-seok raises his eyes and studies Yoon Seong-hyun's expression. He can immediately tell that the man is not lying. However, another image suddenly flashes through Lee Hyun-seok's mind. It is the image of Lee Si-eun when she suggests that they have a conversation later. Since there is already a prior engagement, he cannot give an immediate answer. For now, all Lee Hyun-seok can do is say that he needs some time to think about it. That response makes Yoon Seong-hyun burst into laughter. He tells Lee Hyun-seok that there is no need to give an immediate answer. However, his tone suddenly darkens as he adds that there is plenty of time to consider the offer. With those words, Yoon Seong-hyun turns and walks away. After that encounter, Lee Hyun-seok has no intention of joining that man's guild. Instead, he dials Lee Seon's number and asks where she is. Lee Seon sends him an address, telling him to head straight to the second floor of the Hunter Association and find a small shop called the Hut. When Lee Hyun-seok reaches the second floor, he finds the shop exactly as described. A female worker immediately becomes excited upon seeing him. Eventually, Lee Hyun-seok finds Lee Seon, who welcomes him and suggests that he take a seat. Our protagonist walks toward her while noticing that the cafe seems unusual. His reaction makes Lee Seon ask what happened. Getting straight to the point, Lee Hyun-seok explains what happened. Lee Seon remains calm. When she hears that the matter is related to Yoon Seong-hyun, Lee Seon explains that if the man comes personally to recruit him, then other guilds are likely interested in him as well. When Lee Hyun-seok asks if that means her guild is also interested in recruiting him, he is surprised when she claims that she has no interest in recruiting him. Lee Hyun-seok listens as she explains that joining a guild is not necessary. He can simply work as a freelance hunter. She adds that Yoon Seong-hyun was probably planning to offer him a junior position. This causes Lee Hyun-seok to ask about the difference between a junior hunter and a partner hunter like Yoon Seong-hyun. That question immediately reminds Lee Seon that Lee Hyun-seok never attended a hunter academy. She briefly explains that the system works like a hierarchy and is similar to the structure of a law firm. A law firm has managing partners, followed by senior partners, while juniors function as associates. Hunter guilds operate in a similar manner. The guild consists of partners and junior hunters who form different teams. The partners do not earn salaries like ordinary workers. Instead, they own shares in the guild, allowing them to earn money from the guild's net profits. As expected, Lee Hyun-seok immediately notices that it sounds like a law firm. Lee Seon explains that this is because the first hunter guilds used law firms as their model. She also explains that Lee Hyun-seok does not necessarily need to join a hunter guild and work his way from junior to senior before eventually becoming a partner. In other words, Lee Hyun-seok concludes that she is telling him he can go solo, build a strong reputation, and eventually earn a partner position without following the traditional process. Lee Hyun-seok is speechless when Lee Seon confirms that is exactly her point, while casually offering him another piece of candy. Although he has no idea why she keeps giving him candy, he does not press the matter. Instead, he explains his difficulty. He has no connections or experience, which means getting proper requests as a freelance hunter will be difficult. In response, Lee Seon calmly tells him that she can help him with that free of charge. Lee Hyun-seok does not understand. Lee Seon reaches for a folder while explaining that she is doing this for her own benefit. Basically, she wants Lee Hyun-seok to become indebted to her so that he will eventually join her guild when the time comes. When Lee Hyun-seok opens the folder, Lee Seon explains that the mission takes place in Incheon City, where there is a place called Gyeodongo Island. A corrosion rift has appeared there and has remained open for the past 3 years. Lee Hyun-seok's mission is to patrol the area, observe whether any additional rifts have appeared, and deal with them if necessary. Lee Hyun-seok notices that the starting wage is 5 million won, with an additional 15 million won paid after the mission is completed. However, Lee Hyun-seok refuses to accept the job offer. Lee Seon simply laughs and tells him that he should grow stronger and become famous. Once he does, he will be able to get whatever he wants. Before leaving the decision to him, she makes it clear that the choice is ultimately his. The scene then cuts to a highway. Lee Seon reports her conversation and meeting with Lee Hyun-seok to the guild president. She excitedly explains that Lee Hyun-seok should not be underestimated. After all, he manages to last 4 hours against her. However, the way she phrases it makes the statement easy to misunderstand. Her boss assumes that such a result is possible simply because she deliberately holds back. Lee Seon immediately shakes her head. She explains that throughout all her years as a hunter, she has never seen a rookie survive for 4 hours against her, even when she is merely toying with them. Her boss understands what she means, but wonders how Lee Hyun-seok will perform during the mission. According to him, Lee Hyun-seok simply lacks the experience required to hunt monsters or deal with corrosion rifts. In response, Lee Seon tells him that she has paired Lee Hyun-seok with someone reliable, and when it comes to his growth potential, she is completely convinced. Given enough time, Lee Hyun-seok will not merely surpass her. Eventually, he will become so powerful that he may even be capable of taking down her boss one day. The next chapter begins 1 month before the mission. A package is delivered to our protagonist's house. He looks at it and immediately comments on how unbelievably long it is. It turns out to be his main weapon from his previous life, when he was known as the hero. Aside from that, he has also secured an elixir. He explains that an elixir is a potion containing condensed mana, meant to be used in emergencies when mana is urgently needed. The typical way of handling mana is similar to drinking water from a purifier. To put it simply, mana is taken from the atmosphere, filtered and stored inside the body for later use. An elixir simply shortens that entire process. However, our protagonist uses mana in a completely different way. He skips the storage process entirely, directly absorbing mana from the atmosphere and using it immediately. The advantage of this method is that he can use mana without being limited by the amount stored inside his body. Furthermore, constantly releasing and using mana strengthens his mana channels, allowing him to handle even greater amounts of mana over time. The downside of this seemingly overpowered method is that strengthening the mana channels takes time. That is why our protagonist decides to save some of the elixir while using the rest for training throughout the month. The next scene takes the story back to the island. Lee Hyun-seok's identity is processed, and he is assigned to Squad 8. He joins the group while the other members continue chatting among themselves. Then, his thoughts are interrupted by an all-too-familiar voice. Our protagonist is surprised to see Han Sang-ga. Since the two of them are in the same squad, she takes the initiative and suggests that they work together. When our protagonist asks about her request, she explains that he is naturally stronger than her, so she wants to learn by following him. However, she immediately misunderstands our protagonist's joke about carrying her, making him realize that the poor girl has absolutely no sense of humor. Before they can continue, a man calls for everyone's attention. With the entire Squad 8 gathered, he decides to brief them about the mission. This is especially important because several fresh recruits and rookie hunters are joining them for the mission and are unfamiliar with the terminology. For those who already know the information, he asks for their understanding. He explains that corrosion rifts are classified into different levels, ranging from unclassified, which is the lowest, to Class 1, the highest, and most dangerous classification. In addition, the first rift to appear in a given location is called an alpha corrosion rift. Currently, the alpha corrosion rift on the island is located at a church in the northern part of Insari. Although it is still classified as an unclassified rift, he advises everyone to stay away from it, because the rift has been growing stronger over time. Squad 8's mission is to patrol part of the island, specifically Yupne-ri and Jodong-myeon, and locate and destroy any additional rifts they discover. Hearing that their mission involves eliminating rifts, one of the hunters asks about the rookies. The man briefing them does not answer. Instead, he simply announces that they have arrived. Lee Hyun-seok is left speechless. Regardless, he and Han Sang-ga leave the boat with the rest of the hunters. Before they depart for the mission, an announcement informs them that the situation on the island is being relayed to the offshore control room. If anyone needs assistance, they simply have to contact the control room. The next scene cuts deep into the forest, where the members of Lee Hyun-seok's squad are busy trying to formulate a plan. Suddenly, they pause and turn toward him. Holding up his phone and displaying a map, Lee Hyun-seok suggests that they set up camp at Haegisa Temple and operate from there. Of course, his suggestion is immediately met with criticism. Since he is a rookie, the others want to know what is so important about the temple. Lee Hyun-seok calmly explains in detail how establishing their base there will make surveillance easier. Not to mention the temple is also an ideal place to stay. His suggestion only makes the men even more agitated. They openly shout at him, pointing out that the place he wants them to use as a base is located in the mountains. They ask what will happen if they end up surrounded there. Honestly, Lee Hyun-seok never expects such an intense reaction. He is left speechless, unable to believe that, just like in the other world, people still refuse to listen to logic. Because of this, he suggests that they operate separately. The group then heads toward the temple at full speed. Lee Hyun-seok does not expect the man who expressed concern about the rookies during the earlier briefing to follow them. Curious, he asks Kim Min-jae why he decides to come along. Kim Min-jae explains that he is simply worried about them. Lee Hyun-seok thanks him for his consideration, thinking that at least not everyone completely lacks common sense. But at that moment, our protagonist suddenly senses something. He immediately signals the rest of his group to stop. Kim Min-jae does not understand what is happening, so Lee Hyun-seok insists that he take a look from the other side. When Kim Min-jae does, he is left in shock. A group of monsters has suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Panicking, Kim Min-jae suggests taking a detour because he counts more than 50 of them. Lee Hyun-seok immediately tells him to calm down and asks about his unique skill. Kim Min-jae cannot believe they are actually planning to fight the monsters. After Lee Hyun-seok persuades him, Kim Min-jae reveals that his unique skill is related to fire. More specifically, he can cast fireballs. Kim Min-jae almost regrets revealing it when Lee Hyun-seok suggests that he launch the first attack. To Kim Min-jae's absolute disbelief, Han Sang-ga is also on board with the plan, despite not even knowing what her role in the mission is supposed to be. Desperate, Kim Min-jae tries to talk some sense into Lee Hyun-seok. However, Lee Hyun-seok cuts him off mid-sentence when Kim Min-jae suggests calling for reinforcements because they simply do not have enough time. Unlike Lee Hyun-seok's group, which decides to remain at the temple to observe and scout the situation, the rest of the squad decides to search along the coast. There is no guarantee that the other hunters will receive the message if they radio for help. Besides, things could become chaotic if the goblins decide to scatter and ambush the hunters from different directions. Kim Min-jae thinks about this, and eventually concludes that Lee Hyun-seok is right. Not to mention, their group has already had a falling out with Lee Hyun-seok, meaning there is a chance they will simply refuse to help. That is why Lee Hyun-seok suggests handling the situation themselves. The odds are against them, but they have the perfect opportunity to launch a surprise attack. Using the tip of his spear, Lee Hyun-seok begins formulating a plan on the ground. Kim Min-jae listens intently, and the man is stunned as Lee Hyun-suk's plan gradually takes shape. Our protagonist has already anticipated almost every possible situation. Meanwhile, the goblins are simply relaxing in their camp when a massive fireball suddenly crashes into the middle of them. Now it is our protagonist's turn to step in and buy Kim Min-jae more time to cast another fireball. Lee Hyun-suk moves like lightning, cutting down several goblins in rapid succession. As he fights, he realizes just how effective combat becomes when everyone is assigned a specific role. But while he is thinking about this, a goblin manages to slip past him and charges toward Kim Min-jae. Of course, Lee Hyun-suk simply smiles. He has already anticipated this possibility in his plan. Just as expected, the goblin that slips past him is dealt with by Han Sang-ga. At the same time, Kim Min-jae tells our protagonist that he is ready to cast another spell. Lee Hyun-suk immediately gets out of the way. Kim Min-jae unleashes another massive fireball. Not long afterward, the battle finally comes to an end. Lee Hyun-suk is about to tell them that they did a great job. However, Kim Min-jae's expression suddenly changes. He raises a Glock and points it directly at Lee Hyun-suk. However, Kim Min-jae politely asks our protagonist to step aside, making Lee Hyun-suk almost think the man is about to shoot him. Instead, Kim Min-jae implants some kind of microchip into the monsters. When Lee Hyun-suk asks why he is doing that, Kim Min-jae explains that once the mission is completed and the area is secured, the junk dealer he has a contract with will come to collect the monsters. Puzzled, our protagonist asks about them, so Kim Min-jae explains further that it is difficult for hunters to extract valuable materials and byproducts from monsters themselves. That is why there are specialists known as junk dealers who handle the job for them. The chips allow them to identify which monsters were killed by their contracted hunters and distinguish them from those killed by other hunters. These junk dealers also appraise the items extracted from the monsters, and the profits are divided according to the terms of their contract. When Lee Hyun-suk asks whether Kim Min-jae trusts them, Kim Min-jae reassures him, explaining that this is exactly why he takes the time to find good junk dealers and establish contracts with them. The two continue chatting, completely unaware that a monster is lurking in the darkness. Suddenly, the monster attacks. Lee Hyun-suk, who never lets his guard down, saves Kim Min-jae just in time. The group stares at the new monster. Even an experienced hunter like Kim Min-jae has no idea what he is looking at. Lee Hyun-suk, on the other hand, immediately identifies the creature as some kind of mid-boss compared to the monsters they just faced. This one looks more like their leader, certain that the monster is on a completely different level from the small fries they have been dealing with. Our protagonist tells the group that he will handle it himself. The others do not understand his logic and suggest that they work together. Kim Min-jae even points out that they can buy time with a pincer attack while reporting the situation. Lee Hyun-suk snaps at them, shouting for them not to interfere. He does not want to see the entire group end up in body bags. In his thoughts, he explains that the best way to deal with the monster is to face it alone. That way, he does not have to worry about his comrades getting caught in the crossfire. With that thought in mind, he challenges the monster, telling it to come at him. A moment later, Kim Min-jae asks Han Sang-ga, who looks somewhat uneasy, whether they should not help. She replies that there is no need, even though it appears that our protagonist is being pushed back by the monster. But he has not been hit even once or suffered the slightest injury. The monster launches attacks that even Han Sang-ga would struggle to dodge, yet Lee Hyun-suk effortlessly evades every one of them while counterattacking at the same time. The momentum of the battle gradually shifts in our protagonist's favor, to the point where it seems like he is now simply toying with the monster. Han Sang-ga is left wondering whether Lee Hyun-suk can even be considered a rookie hunter like her anymore. Meanwhile, our boy suddenly creates some distance from the monster. Everyone is shocked when he suddenly tosses his spear into the air. At the same time, the monster charges straight toward him, prompting the group to warn him to be careful. However, everything is already within our protagonist's calculations. The spear comes crashing down and lands directly in the monster's head, killing it on the spot. Lee Hyun-suk admits that the monster is incredibly strong, considering how difficult it is to even move, despite him using his black flames to burn away all of its strength. Nonetheless, he finishes the monster with ease, leaving the entire group stunned by the swift and precise move. Once again, Kim Min-jae is stunned, wondering whether the kid standing before him is really a rookie hunter. Lee Hyun-suk snaps him out of his thoughts. He asks whether monsters like this normally appear on Gyeodongdo Island. Kim Min-jae shakes his head. He believes the monster must have come from a different rift, separate from the one on the island, and that the rift must be at least Class 3. No monster like this has ever been recorded coming from the core of the island's rift. Lee Hyun-suk remembers the pre-mission briefing about how corrosion rifts are classified. He is certain that the alpha corrosion rift on the island is currently unclassified. If that is the case, he tells the group, then the alpha corrosion rift on the island has already risen to Class 3. Han Sang-ga tries to say something, but our protagonist tells her to think about it carefully. If the alpha corrosion rift has not increased in class, then how can they explain the monster they just faced? The difference between an unclassified rift and a Class 3 rift is like night and day. If what our protagonist is saying is true, then there is a high chance that no hunter will make it out of the island alive. Because of this, Kim Min-jae desperately suggests that they warn the other hunters and try to save them. However, our protagonist immediately rejects the idea. He points out that they are human, meaning they have limits too. Simply wandering around the island in search of other hunters is a terrible idea to begin with. This causes Han Sanga to ask what he would do if he were on the opposite side and had to consider the situation of the other hunters. When she tells him that abandoning them is unfair, our protagonist cuts her off and asks whether she expects him to naturally feel compassion and rush to save them. He points out to the naive girl that this is not about emotion. It is about the outcome. From his experience, he knows that some deaths are unavoidable. In situations like this, someone is going to die regardless of what he or anyone else does to stop it. In other words, they cannot allow themselves to be swayed by emotions. Hunters cannot survive with that kind of mindset. The next scene takes place at night. Our protagonist comes out of a deserted residence and informs everyone that there is not a trace of monsters nearby. As expected from their current location, they can see the other hunters in the distance, their positions revealed by the lights. Hearing this, Lee Hyun-sok thinks it is extremely dangerous. The lights are revealing the hunters' locations. If it were only those small fries, it would not matter. But now that a mid-boss is out there, who knows how many more powerful monsters could be lurking around. The least he can do is send a message and inform the squad about the situation. A few minutes later, Lee Hyun-seok learns from Kim Min-jae that destroying the previously mentioned core of the corrosion rift will cause every monster originating from the rift to disappear. Without the energy radiating from the rift to sustain them, the monsters will eventually vanish. Our protagonist finds the explanation very straightforward. In his mind, the solution becomes simple. All he has to do to end this is destroy the rift itself. He makes his move while Han Sanga and Kim Min-jae are resting. Quietly, he places a device beside them. During Kim Min-jae's earlier explanation, our protagonist also learns that the device is basically an alarm that alerts them whenever a monster approaches. With that, Lee Hyun-seok races toward the location of the island's alpha corrosion rift. Things are supposed to go smoothly. However, our protagonist suddenly stops. This time he is standing face to face with a completely different monster, one he has never seen before. At the same time, in the island's control room, reports of multiple squads suffering heavy casualties continue flooding in. The man in charge of monitoring the hunters stares at the incoming reports in frustration, wondering aloud what the hell is happening. Since this is an emergency, he suggests using the emergency network to call for reinforcements and sending out an urgent request for any hunters in the vicinity. However, the man is stunned when one of his subordinates reports that someone is approaching the alpha corrosion rift. The manager immediately becomes furious and orders the squad to retreat. But his subordinate quickly corrects him, explaining that the signal indicates only one person is heading toward the rift. Of course, that person just happens to be our protagonist. At the same time, another report comes in, revealing that he is the one who originally spotted the anomaly and the upgrade of the alpha corrosion rift on the island. The manager can barely believe what he is hearing and immediately orders them to connect to the protagonist's terminal. Unfortunately, when they finally establish the connection, our protagonist is already being chased by the monster he encountered earlier. Because of that, all they can do is listen to him vent while he swears and curses them for not doing their job properly. Broski's swearing becomes so outrageous that the workers start wondering if they should just mute him. Anyway, Lee Hyun-seok continues running while explaining that his paradox flames are not powerful enough to kill the monster chasing him. On top of that, the method he used to kill the mid-boss monster will not work against this one. That strategy involved weakening the monster with his flames before finishing it off with his spear. Since he needs a large amount of mana to execute his plan, and he cannot simply leave the island, there is only one place where he can obtain enough mana. And that place just happens to be the Alpha Corrosion Rift. Without hesitation, Lee Hyun-seok leaps into the rift. The moment he enters, a worker in the control room immediately reports that his signal has vanished. When the worker informs the manager that Lee Hyun-seok has entered the rift, the man can only swear under his breath. Inside the rift, Lee Hyun-seok admits that the place is much larger than he imagined. He heard from Kim Min-jae that unclassified and Class 3 rifts are not particularly large, making him wonder just how enormous Class 2 and Class 1 rifts must be. However, he will find that out later. Right now, he has to deal with the monster that chased him all the way into the rift. As the fight begins, Lee Hyun-seok explains one major problem with his paradox flames. Just like Itachi's Amaterasu, the black flames can spread across everything except him. That includes his allies. Throughout the previous battle, our boy was deliberately holding back in order to keep the flames under control. But now, he is inside the rift alone with a bunch of monsters. Even if he eventually loses control of his black flames, it does not matter. The monster lets out a roar as it is consumed by the flames. Lee Hyun-seok calmly notes that this is exactly why he prefers fighting alone. Without anyone around, there is nothing holding him back. As the flames continue burning, our protagonist moves on to the important part. Just as he did when he fought the mid-boss, he begins absorbing the surrounding mana. As previously mentioned, the mana he absorbs strengthens his mana channels, making them considerably more powerful. And Lee Hyun-seok admits that the method is proving to be far more effective than he expected. In the next moment, the monster suddenly lets out another roar. Lee Hyun-seok smirks. So, this is what the monster was up to. It turns out the creature was calling for reinforcements. A horde of monsters suddenly charges toward him, but to our protagonist, their numbers are completely meaningless. His black flames immediately spread through the entire group, burning them all. The flames are definitely stronger now, but Lee Hyun-seok notices that they are still nowhere near as powerful as they were in his previous world. In the middle of his thoughts, he suddenly hears something telling him to stop. A mysterious figure even moves to attack him from behind. Lee Hyun-seok manages to dodge the attack, and he immediately realizes what happened. The monster deliberately waited for the flames to burn out before revealing itself. It turns out this is the core of the rift. Our protagonist knows this because he remembers Kim Min-jae explaining that the core manifests as a unique monster that exists on a completely different level from the other creatures inside the rift. Knowing this, Lee Hyun-seok decides to test that theory. If what Kim Min-jae said is true, then this monster should be capable of handling his 4-hit combo. With that, he charges forward. The core raises its weapon and blocks his direct spear thrust. The attack is infused with mana. A ray shoots through the monster and sends it flying. The technique Lee Hyun-seok uses is called Dual Orbit Spear. It is a simple attack that creates multiple follow-up strikes after the initial blow connects. The battle continues, and Lee Hyun-seok basically gives a 2-page essay explaining how useful the technique is. In summary, an opponent facing this type of attack will have a difficult time dodging every strike. Eventually, they are bound to make a mistake. And once that mistake happens, Lee Hyun-seok is ready to punish it. Nonetheless, our protagonist eventually tells the core that it is over. And just like that, he finishes the monster with multiple dual-orbit spears. After Lee Hyun-seok defeats it, the core begins disintegrating. The particles suddenly gather together and form a box. Lee Hyun-seok looks down at the box in his hand in confusion, but when he opens it to see what is inside, he becomes even more shocked. Meanwhile, back in the control room, the workers and manager are doing everything they can to get the situation on the island under control. The manager eventually becomes completely at a loss for what to do as reports continue pouring in, each one announcing that the number of casualties is increasing. At this point, the man can only hope for some kind of miracle, and as if the universe heard him, one of his subordinates suddenly reports an incoming message from Lee Hyun-seok. The message appears on the screen. Of course, our protagonist has just solved the entire problem by destroying the core of the Alpha Corrosion Rift. The manager is too stunned to even react as reports begin coming in that the monsters are disappearing. Meanwhile, the man responsible for solving the entire crisis is busy chilling outside and enjoying the night breeze like nothing happened. Meanwhile, Han Sang-ga and Kim Min-jae are locked in battle against the corrosion monsters. Han Sang-ga is beginning to be overwhelmed by the constant waves of monsters. There are simply too many of them, and our protagonist is nowhere to be found. To make matters worse, Kim Min-jae is beginning to reach his limit. Han Sang-ga has no idea how much longer she can keep fighting either. Still, she refuses to give up and continues battling the monsters. Unfortunately, something suddenly feels wrong with her body. Her legs refuse to move. Several monsters are already closing in on her, leaving her with no choice but to brace herself for what is coming. However, nothing happens. That is because, at that very moment, our protagonist successfully destroys the core. Before anything else can happen, the scene shifts to the island's hunter-gathering point. Lee Hyun-seok's squad members who mocked him earlier are now completely shocked. Our protagonist is the last person to arrive at the gathering point, and the moment he does, they immediately begin discussing how he managed to solo clear a Class 3 corrosion rift all by himself. Just then, Kim Min-jae waves at him to get his attention. The man explains that he was surprised when he saw the message on his phone informing him that Lee Hyun-seok had taken on the corrosion rift alone. Both Kim Min-jae and Han Sang-ga are stunned by his response. Lee Hyun-seok simply claims that he did it to protect everyone, which is rather ironic, considering he was against the idea earlier. In the middle of their conversation, someone approaches them and addresses Lee Hyun-seok. The man explains that he is from the Korea Operating Corporation. His name is Byun Jeong-tae, and he is the 3rd branch manager for Northern Gyeongincheon Province. Lee Hyun-seok remembers him because he is the one who told him to come here in the first place. Without wasting any time, Byun Jeong-tae informs him that the mayor wants to see him. Lee Hyun-seok is then taken to meet the mayor of the city. The moment he steps out of the vehicle, the only thing on his mind is how much he should be paid and how he is going to negotiate his payment for clearing the Alpha Corrosion Rift. Nonetheless, a man soon approaches him. He is supposed to be Lee Hyun-seok's guide and introduces himself as Lee PJ, the communications and liaison officer. On the way to meet the mayor, Lee PJ admits that the mayor is looking forward to meeting Lee Hyun-seok. Both of them were shocked when they heard the news that he had cleared the rift. When Lee PJ mentions that the mayor even went as far as clearing his morning schedule for the meeting, Lee Hyun-seok asks whether that was really necessary. However, he does not mean it as a complaint. Because of that, Lee PJ explains that our protagonist does not understand the significance of what he has accomplished. The only person who has ever managed to do something similar is the Great Pioneer, the very first hunter. In other words, Lee Hyun-seok's achievement is enormous anyway. Our protagonist is soon brought before the mayor. The mayor naturally thanks Lee Hyun-seok for coming. He introduces himself as Park Ji-yeon and apologizes for making him come despite the awful rainy weather. Excited to meet the young hunter, he suggests that they talk while instructing Lee PJ to prepare some tea for them. Once they are seated, Mayor Park begins by explaining that Lee Hyun-suk has performed a great service for the country. As mayor, the corrosion rift on Jeodongdo Island has been a huge headache for him and the city. Lee Hyun-seok listens as the mayor further explains how they have been dealing with the problem despite their limited budget. In other words, the man is extremely grateful that the problem has finally been solved once and for all. Just then, Mayor Park remembers that this is Lee Hyun-seok's very first job as a hunter. Lee Hyun-seok simply nods. The mayor suddenly becomes overly excited upon hearing this. Our protagonist wonders what is going on, as the man launches into a long explanation about how Korea is the safest country in the world and how Incheon City is one of the country's key regions. According to the mayor, this is largely thanks to the international airport. On top of that, various free economic projects have attracted foreign investors to the region. Honestly, no one understands why he has suddenly started giving what sounds like a sales pitch. However, Lee Hyun-seok soon realizes what the mayor is actually doing. He is trying to interest him. Mayor Park promises to provide Lee Hyun-seok with any kind of assistance he needs, but Lee Hyun-seok is already fully aware of what that assistance entails. After all, on the way to meet the mayor, Byung Jeongtae from the Korea Operating Corporation had asked him what kind of hunter he wanted to become. Lee Hyun-seok had given him a vague answer. Still, Byung Jeongtae understood. He believed that our protagonist would become a famous and highly skilled hunter. Once that happened, companies would want to sign him for commercials, while television shows would likely try to scout him as well. This causes Lee Hyun-seok to ask whether Byung Jeongtae is worried about what might happen to him if that occurs. The man does not hide his concern. He explains that there are many cases where skilled hunters become intoxicated by fame and eventually forget their duties. Even if Korea is the safest place on Earth, no one can predict what might happen in the future. Byung Jeongtae advises Lee Hyun-seok not to forget his responsibilities or allow power and fame to sway him. He knows that after what Lee Hyun-seok has accomplished on the island, countless people will have their eyes on him. He ends the conversation by saying that he hopes someone like Lee Hyun-seok will continue to serve as a symbol of hope. Back in the present, Lee Hyun-seok admits that he is curious to see how far all of this will go. Not to mention, the mayor is not even trying to hide his intentions. Unfortunately for Mayor Park, Lee Hyun-seok is a man who has suffered countless hardships throughout his life. He is not the type to be easily swayed by power or empty promises, so he allows the mayor to finish before calmly pointing out that if the mayor wants to provide him with assistance, then he naturally expects something in exchange. Mayor Park's face immediately turns pale, and he freezes the moment. Lee Hyun-seok mentions improving his declining approval rating so that he can get re-elected. The mayor quickly recovers and admits that Lee Hyun-seok is surprisingly well informed. His term is about to end, and things are not looking good for him, trying to make his proposal sound more appealing. Mayor Park explains that he is being direct, before revealing that Lee Hyun-seok needed approval from City Hall to participate in the Island Commission in the first place. Lee Hyun-seok agrees. A rookie really does need permission from City Hall. But if the mayor frames the situation properly, he can claim that he was the one who helped Lee Hyun-seok, or rather, the one who discovered such a promising talent. All he has to do is rope Lee Hyun-seok into his campaign. As predicted, the mayor begins discussing various opportunities. He reveals that he has connections with numerous domestic and overseas companies. He even tells Lee Hyun-seok that he could become the face of the instant coffee brand they are currently drinking. But at that moment, Lee Hyun-seok stops him. He seriously asks whether the mayor thinks he is cheap. The mayor is stunned. Lee Hyun-seok explains that he really does not need the man's help. It is obvious that he will become famous one day. Everything the mayor claims he can offer will be available to Lee Hyun-seok several times over when that day comes. Mayor Park tries to stop him, but Lee Hyun-seok makes his position clear. He simply is not interested in anything the mayor has to offer. With that said, our protagonist leaves City Hall, wishing Mayor Park good luck with his re-election. Elsewhere, a man receives a report. After hearing everything that happened, he turns toward the kneeling man and asks whether this means the experiment on the island was a failure. The man apologizes, but the hooded figure does not seem particularly worried. However, the kneeling man quickly tells him that he has good news. He shows the hooded figure a video clip of Lee Hyun-seok during the hunter evaluation test. The hooded man watches the footage, then a smile slowly appears on his face. Even he has to admit that Lee Hyun-seok is impressive. The story skips forward a bit. Every month, there is one day everyone looks forward to. Our protagonist explains that ranking changes are usually nothing more than entertainment for the public. This time, however, things are completely different. He scrolls through his phone to check the latest rankings. As expected, Lee Se-eun takes the usual 10th place. In 5th place is a purple-haired hunter named Kim Chae-hyun. 3rd place belongs to the flame hunter, Choi Yorium. The list continues, but the person sitting in 1st place is not mentioned. Instead, our protagonist finds himself waiting for an interview. The reason is simple. He entered the rankings in record time. Normally, a hunter clearing a Class 3 corrosion rift would not attract much attention. However, for someone like our protagonist, a rookie hunter, it is considered an extraordinary achievement. Standing at the center of the stage, he is bombarded with endless questions from reporters. To him, the entire situation feels like being part of a reality show. Even so, he tells them that he has a tight schedule and will answer only one question. One journalist beats everyone else to the opportunity and asks what he plans to do in the future as a hunter. Instead of giving the usual answer about doing his best, Lee Hyun-seok simply tells them to keep watching him. Later, our protagonist is taken by helicopter to a ruined city, specifically the site that was once known as Gonsol Prison. As he observes the desolate landscape from above, someone explains that this is what most countries look like now. The man goes on to explain that after the rifts appeared, many nations lost their administrative power. Their own country, however, became a global powerhouse. Not only did they successfully defend themselves, but, as the old man sitting beside our protagonist proudly explains, they also discovered how to use materials from the rifts to advance their technology. Most countries that suffered corrosion rifts, like the one surrounding Gonsol Prison, failed to recover. Some capitals even disappeared entirely after the rifts first appeared. The helicopter eventually lands so they can get a closer look. The old man explains the Great 80s, the name given to the world's most dangerous rifts, with Gonsol Prison being one of them. The disaster occurred 13 years ago. Everyone inside the city died before they even had a chance to escape. In simple terms, the entire city was wiped out within days. The old man continues briefing our protagonist, explaining how disasters like this shattered the internal governments of several countries. Lee Hyun-seok does not mind the lecture because he enjoys learning new things. However, the old man still has not explained why he was brought here. Then, without warning, the old man changes the subject. He mentions that Yoon Seong-yoon invited Lee Hyun-seok to join his guild, but our protagonist turned down the offer. Lee Hyun-seok immediately remembers the huge man he met during the hunter examination. He cannot believe that someone so important has been asking about his whereabouts. Seeing the surprise on his face, the old man tells him to relax. Since that information is classified as personal, he naturally did not reveal anything. Even so, our protagonist finds the situation troublesome. He believes those people will stop at nothing to recruit him. The old man then hands him a folder. He says he respects Lee Hyun-seok's decision not to join a guild, but if he wants to stop Yoon Seong-yoon's repeated approaches, he should earn even greater recognition by completing an important mission personally proposed by the association president. Lee Hyun-seok immediately asks what the president wants in return, clearly suspecting there is an ulterior motive. Naturally, the old man does not answer directly. Instead, he simply reminds him not to forget who helped him. After thinking it over, our protagonist decides that accepting the mission is not a bad idea. Since it comes directly from the association president, it could significantly boost his reputation. Opening the file, he learns that his mission is to escort a cargo shipment containing valuable goods from Busan to Nanning City. However, he fails to see how such a mission could possibly be important. The old man patiently explains that many countries collapsed because of the rifts, and that maintaining strong international relationships has become more important than ever. Lee Hyun-seok finally understands the purpose behind the mission. Unfortunately for the old man, that does not change his mind. The man quickly tries to stop him, insisting that the mission is extremely important to the Korean government. Even so, Lee Hyun-seok remains unmoved. He calmly tells the old man that he has no interest in politics. The old man warns him that rejecting the mission could damage his relationship with the government, especially since it is an official request. In response, Lee Hyun-seok casually tosses the mission documents out of the helicopter. He then thanks the old man, whose name we still do not know, for the ride. Confused, the old man asks what he means. Lee Hyun-seok calmly replies that he plans to swim all the way back to Seoul. With that, he jumps out of the helicopter. The old man can only watch as Lee Hyun-seok dives into the ocean below. All he can do is complain about how reckless Gen Z has become. The next scene shifts to Incheon Port. A walker is casually relaxing nearby when Lee Hyun-seok suddenly surfaces from the water, grumbling about the exhausting swim. The man immediately comments that he must have been through a lot. Lee Hyun-seok simply thanks him for his concern. Later, he reflects on his current situation. He realizes that if he truly wants to become a major figure, he needs to take on the most dangerous and difficult missions that other hunters refuse to accept. If he accomplishes that, he will never be forced to submit to any guild, association, or powerful organization. Almost as if fate is responding to his thoughts, the perfect mission notification appears on his phone. An association is requesting assistance with a hostage rescue operation. The estimated threat level of the corrosion rift involved is Class 2. The report explains that fishermen from Gyeonggi Island and Tongyang had set out to sea. This time, however, something unusual happened. The corrosion monsters nesting around Tsushima Island appeared and were responsible for abducting them. The report comes from the only fisherman who barely survived the attack. According to his testimony, Everyone else was captured alive and taken to Tsushima Island. That means Lee Hyunseok's mission is to travel to the island, rescue the kidnapped fishermen, and eliminate the corrosion rift at the same time. That is the objective of the mission. The reward for completing it is 50 million won, and our protagonist notes that the payout is not bad. That is, if he can clear the entire mission by himself. On top of that, successfully completing the mission would greatly increase his fame, as it would give him a heroic achievement that no one could question. The real challenge, however, is whether he can actually pull it off. He explains that monsters from a Class 3 corrosion rift possess enough destructive power to destroy tanks. Class 2 monsters, on the other hand, possess strength comparable to natural disasters. As for Class 1, an entire nation is mobilized the moment one appears. Although he relied on his paradox flames to clear the previous Class 3 rift, he is not confident the same strategy will work against a Class 2 rift. In simple terms, he needs help. After thinking it over for a while, he finally remembers someone he can call. The next scene shows our protagonist fully geared up as he heads toward the mission. A familiar voice calls out to him. Of course, the person he invited is Han Sang-ga. She asks how much longer it will take to reach Tsushima Island. Scratching the back of his head, Lee Hyunseok estimates that it will probably take another hour or so. He suggests that she get some rest before the battle begins. However, her attention is focused elsewhere. She is far more interested in the shoulder gear he is wearing, examining it like an expert appraiser. She identifies it as the Iron Seraph, explaining its impressive features before asking where he managed to get such a limited edition piece of equipment. Lee Hyunseok honestly did not expect her to be this talkative. Still, he casually explains that he bought it from his usual junk dealer. Han Sang-ga immediately complains that her own dealer has never treated her that well. Without missing the opportunity, Lee Hyunseok teases her. Compared to him, a rising hunter who solo cleared a Class 3 rift, she is still just the Hunter Academy's top graduate. Although he says it jokingly, Han Sang-ga's expression darkens slightly. Noticing this, Lee Hyunseok simply tells her that if she feels wronged, she should become stronger. A few days earlier, Han Sang-ga had been surprised when Lee Hyunseok contacted her first and asked her to become his teammate. After hearing the details of the mission, she hesitated. After all, she had nearly died during their very first mission together, and that had only been a Class 3 rift. When she remained silent, Lee Hyunseok reminded her that she was the one who wanted to become stronger. Then he made her an offer she simply could not refuse. If she joined him, he promised to train her personally and help her become several times stronger. Back in the present, Lee Hyunseok notices the sudden determination in her expression. Meanwhile, Han Sang-ga silently vows to become strong enough to dive into hell itself without hesitation. At that moment, alarms begin ringing throughout the ship. The crew announces that an unidentified object has been detected ahead. Lee Hyunseok quickly counts a total of 5 ships. Just as he wonders how they will manage to get closer without being detected, he turns in surprise and sees Han Sang-ga hovering slightly above the deck. He makes an innocent remark that was originally meant as a compliment. Instead, Han Sang-ga realizes that he cannot levitate. For some reason, discovering something Lee Hyunseok cannot do brings her immense satisfaction. His face immediately darkens as she bursts into laughter, happily getting revenge for his earlier teasing. As punishment, she ends up with a large bump on her head and she is forced to carry Lee Hyunseok on her back as they race across the sea. Just then, Lee Hyunseok notices something in the distance. When he suggests they target the nearest ship first, Han Sang-ga asks why. He explains that he can sense the mana surrounding each vessel. The farther back the ships are, the stronger the mana becomes. That means the ship at the rear is emitting an overwhelmingly dangerous aura. She nods in understanding, but something else catches her eye. Spotting several silhouettes on the nearest ship, she wonders if they are the kidnapped fishermen without answering. Lee Hyunseok prepares to jump aboard. Before leaping, he simply tells her to keep her eyes open. The two of them land on the ship together. The figures standing before them are nowhere close to being human. Worse still, there are dozens of them. Lee Hyunseok strikes first. Several clean blows land, allowing him to quickly assess their strength. The monsters are not particularly powerful. They are merely the lowest tier of Class 2 monsters. Just as he is about to explain the battle plan to Han Sang-ga, he is shocked to see her fighting at full power from the very beginning. Lee Hyunseok immediately stops her. He tells her that she is wasting far too much mana against enemies like these. It is completely unnecessary. Han Sang-ga grits her teeth but reluctantly follows his instructions. Even then, Lee Hyunseok tells her she is still using too much mana. He advises her to reduce her output even further. Throughout the battle, Han Sang-ga remains deep in thought. A painful memory resurfaces in her mind, a cold reminder of the weakness she once despised. It is that very memory that drives her forward. She swears never to be weak again. That is why she continues pushing herself, determined to become strong enough to leap into hell itself without fear. The next chapter opens at the end of the battle. Just then, our protagonist approaches her. It turns out that while she was fighting one enemy, he managed to destroy the rest of the ships. She wipes the blood from her sword, clearly annoyed by the situation, but it is not something she can complain about. That is because she managed to learn something from Lee Hyunseok's advice. Her expression makes it obvious that she hates to admit it. At first, Lee Hyunseok thinks he did not do much. However, in the next moment he is shocked when she casually reveals that he is the first person to ever give her advice. That leaves him wondering what exactly she learned and what the instructors at the Hunter Academy had been doing all this time. She reveals that she is a quick learner. That confession makes our protagonist realize how frustrating it must have been for the instructors to teach her. Even more shocking is the fact that she admits there is not a single instructor she has not already surpassed. Lee Hyun-seok is left speechless, because that means if he continues teaching her, she will eventually become stronger than him. Even so, he tells her not to get her hopes up, because she will eventually be disappointed when that does not happen. Naturally, that statement only pisses her off. Eventually, they finally reach their destination. Our protagonist thanks the crew members who brought them there. The men decide to remain on standby at Gyeoji Island and wish them luck. Turning to Han Sanga, our protagonist recalls from the report that the kidnapped fishermen are being held at a shrine. She nods but explains that there are 2 shrines on the island, the Gaijin Shrine and the Adazumi Shrine. Based on the distance, Lee Hyun-seok suggests making the Gaijin Shrine their first stop. They could simply run there, but Han Sanga points out that it would still take them a couple of hours. However, to Lee Hyun-seok, getting there is not the main issue. The report mentioned that 15 fishermen had been captured. Carrying all of them back would be difficult, and it would become even more troublesome if any of them were injured. On top of that, he can sense the mana of monsters. Once they rescue the fishermen, the monsters will undoubtedly chase them. To avoid that situation, Lee Hyun-seok thinks for a moment before telling Han Sanga that they need to find a vehicle. After locating a minibus, Lee Hyun-seok lets her drive when he learns she knows how to. Our protagonist immediately starts holding on for dear life. They are currently being chased by monsters, and our protagonist cannot help shouting at Han Sanga while arguing about her driving skills. Putting that aside, he climbs onto the roof of the minibus to deal with the horde pursuing them like zombies. He ties a rope around his waist and another to his spear. Next, he uses the spear like a harpoon. He throws it, piercing several undead monsters at once. Using the rope, he retrieves the spear. He continues repeating the process. Suddenly, several monsters leap down from the cliffs above them. Han Sanga immediately tells him to leave it to her as she handles the steering wheel, like she is starring in a Fast and Furious movie. Just like that, the undead are sent flying and wiped out. Meanwhile, the girl is having the time of her life. Our protagonist, on the other hand, is terrified because he has no desire to get reincarnated for a second time due to a traffic accident. The monsters are relentless, and the chase continues. Eventually, the Gaijin Shrine comes into view, and Han Sanga wonders aloud how they are supposed to stop the monsters from following them. Lee Hyun-seok tells her not to worry because he has it covered. The moment the minibus passes through the shrine's entrance, Lee Hyun-seok immediately activates his Amaterasu. Black flames instantly engulf the entire horde, reducing the pursuing monsters to ashes. With that taken care of, he turns and heads deeper into the shrine. Fortunately, some of the fishermen who had been taken hostage are being held there. Han Sanga approaches one of the conscious survivors and introduces herself as a hunter from the Hunter Association. For some reason, the man immediately panics and starts screaming the moment he sees her. Thinking she did something wrong, she desperately tries to explain that they came to rescue them. Instead, the man continues screaming, desperately yelling for her to run away. She is still trying to process his warning when a samurai, clearly a corrosion monster, suddenly appears behind her, ready to strike. Thankfully, our protagonist steps in with a perfectly timed save. Narrowing his gaze, Lee Hyun-seok tells Han Sanga to get the survivors to the minibus while he deals with the monster himself. Lee Hyun-seok and the undead samurai engage in a fierce battle, and for a while neither gains the upper hand. The moment our protagonist parries the undead samurai's strike with his spear, creating a brief opening, Han Sanga suddenly joins the fight, ramming the undead with the minibus. Honestly, our protagonist should never let her get behind the wheel again. Predictably, he takes one look at the battered undead before telling her to promise never to drive again. She immediately snaps back, telling him to shut up and get in already. As they speed away, our protagonist confirms that all the captured men have been accounted for. However, Han Sanga suddenly warns him that they have company ahead. It turns out to be another group of undead. Our protagonist can only wonder where they keep coming from. Han Sanga is confused when he suddenly asks for her sword. As she reaches for it, she explains that asking a swordsman for their sword is a huge insult, so he had better know what he is doing. With that said, she tosses the sword toward him. Our protagonist catches it, now wielding both his spear and her sword. However, what truly matters is the glowing glove he is wearing. A few days ago, after clearing the rift on Yodongdo Island, our protagonist received a reward box. At first glance, the item inside looked like an ordinary glove, but the moment he put it on, he discovered it was anything but ordinary. The glove can absorb mana from the atmosphere just like he can. Unlike him, however, it can store that mana. The simplest way to imagine it is as a battery that stores and greatly amplifies the wearer's mana reserves. When he first tested it, our protagonist discovered it gave him enough power to rival an S-rank hunter like Lee Seon. With that, he activates the mana stored inside the glove. In the blink of an eye, our protagonist wipes out the entire undead horde. Naturally, Han Sanga is left speechless. With the path finally clear, they continue toward the port. A few hours later, They are almost there when yet another wave of monsters suddenly appears. Now it is Han Sang-ga's turn to wonder where they keep coming from. When she complains that the minibus has reached its limit, our protagonist remains completely unfazed and simply tells her to keep driving. She is about to argue when they suddenly pass through some kind of invisible barrier. The instant they cross it, every monster chasing them is unable to follow. Han Sang-ga is stunned. Because of that, she wonders if it has something to do with the strange markings on the wall. Earlier, our protagonist had drawn them while explaining that they were a protective geometric formation. Han Sang-ga has no idea what he is talking about, so he simply tells her that it is supposed to repel monsters. When she asks how he learned something like that, he tells her she would never understand because she would never believe he learned it in another world. Our protagonist quietly admires his handiwork as Han Sang-ga steps outside. She asks whether the formation can repel any monster. Unfortunately, he tells her no. He explains that it does not work against true monsters, such as the undead samurai, who can pass through it with ease. Just then, the samurai suddenly speaks. The moment its eyes glow red, Han Sang-ga feels as though something has sliced across her neck. Great, it is now Miyamoto Musashi from Baki. Trying to make sense of it, Han Sang-ga blurts out a name on the spot, calling the ability the Mind's Eye. Our protagonist has no idea what she is talking about. However, those two words are enough to make Han Sang-ga break into a cold sweat. Her entire body trembles as she explains that the Mind's Eye is a legendary technique beyond the five senses. According to her, only a handful of true sword masters ever awaken it, allowing them to see through their opponent's next move. This skill is incredibly difficult to master, and she cannot understand how an undead monster managed to possess it. At that moment, Lee Hyun-seok gently places a hand on her shoulder and tells her there is no need to be afraid. He calmly explains that techniques like the Mind's Eye are merely tricks in the end. His expression turns serious as he tells her to watch carefully because she is about to learn something. Meanwhile, the samurai continues swinging its sword as though challenging our protagonist to a duel. Han Sang-ga is shocked that he intends to face the monster alone. Instead of responding, he begins explaining that techniques like the so-called Mind's Eye are nothing more than the accumulation of information and experience gathered through countless battles. It is simply an acquired reflex. Because of that, it can be influenced by emotions such as fear and hostility. Likewise, abilities like the Mind's Eye can be disrupted by overwhelming the opponent with killing intent. Our protagonist continues listing other famous swordsmanship concepts, such as the sword heart, the state of selflessness, the union of man and sword, and many others. Standing before the samurai, he tells Han Sang-ga that all of these are simply different realms. With that, Lee Hyun-seok unleashes a single strike. The undead samurai is instantly defeated. Its armor shatters completely, and the monster is slain in one blow. He then turns toward Han Sang-ga as if to show her that there is nothing truly special about these so-called realms. He reflects that people often become trapped by illusions after learning a special technique like the Mind's Eye, but some, like him, have broken beyond those illusions. He achieved that only through countless sacrifices. Meanwhile, Han Sang-ga lowers her head. She quietly reflects on everything that happened, asking herself what she had truly accomplished during this mission. She had convinced herself that she had done her best. Yet, our protagonist has just shown her that true strength exists on a level far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Gripping her sword tightly, she finally makes up her mind. She looks at our protagonist and sincerely asks him to help her. This time, she wants him to teach her properly. In response, he asks what she thinks he has been doing all this time. He wonders if all the advice and demonstrations he gave her were not enough. She shakes her head. It was not enough. She needs direct guidance because compared to him, she is ridiculously weak. When he demands to know why she is so desperate to become stronger, she finally reveals her reason. She wants to destroy Club Shaddai with her own hands. The 8 most dangerous corrosion rifts in the world are known as the Great 8, and Club Shaddai is one of them. It is infamous for swallowing the Himalayas in a single breath. Hearing that, our protagonist thinks her goal is far too ambitious and wonders if it is driven by revenge. She calmly nods. She wants to avenge her family. Of course, she hands our protagonist a business card, explaining that she is not asking him to teach her for free. He is genuinely surprised when he reads it. She is a member of the KY Group, a massive corporation with a market capitalization of 257 trillion won. The company belongs to her family. In other words, she is the daughter of one of the country's most prestigious families. She nods but explains that it was her grandfather, the patriarch, who built the company. As for herself, she has no interest in the succession battle. On the contrary, our protagonist thinks that if she becomes a famous hunter, claiming the position of heir would be effortless. Still, he knows she did not hand him her business card just for him to admire it. She offers him a deal. If he agrees to train her, she will provide him with high-grade elixirs, the kind that cannot be found on the market. Even if they could be purchased, they would cost a ridiculous fortune. In exchange for making her stronger, she promises to help him reach the level of strength he desires. Unfortunately, the offer does not interest him. She would never believe him if he told her the truth. After all, he already reached the pinnacle of strength in his previous life as the hero. Now, the only reason he continues growing stronger is to restore everything back to normal. Even so, he accepts her proposal. However, he tells her that he does not need rare or expensive items. Instead, he hands her a list of the things he actually needs before suggesting they move the rescued men to the medical center. Later, at the medical center, Han Sanga asks the doctor how long the survivors will need to recover. After examining the 7 rescued men, the doctor explains that, considering their severe malnutrition, it will take at least a week before they recover enough to hold a proper conversation. Still, he assures them that they will be informed the moment any of the patients regain consciousness. Our protagonist nods. That sounds good enough, since they have an entire week to spare. He turns to Han Sanga and suggests they begin training immediately. The proposal catches her completely off guard. A short while later, the two stand outside the medical center, ready to spar. Before they begin, Lee Hyun-suk asks her a simple question. If he attacked her with his full strength, could she dodge? She wonders why he would even ask something so obvious. The difference in their strength is overwhelming. She would be crushed instantly. However, he immediately corrects her. She can dodge, as long as she pushes her senses beyond their limits. He then begins listing every organ associated with the 5 senses, from the eyes all the way to the skin. Stepping dangerously close, he tells her that she must learn to control every one of her senses. Only then can she fight consciously, instead of relying on unconscious instinct. The moment he signals the start of the match, Han Sanga immediately reaches for her sword. Even though our protagonist is standing right in front of her, he suddenly disappears. She desperately searches for him before she can react. The tip of his spear is already resting against her neck. He calmly informs her that she has failed. If this had been a real battle, she would already be dead. He explains that her reactions are far too slow because she insists on thinking first instead of trusting her senses. Lee Hyun-suk tells her that there is no time to think during real combat. A single moment of hesitation can cost her everything. That is why she must rely on her senses. Furthermore, anything she has yet to master can easily deceive her. For now, everything he has taught her is only theory. The practical lesson is about to begin. A few moments later, one of the guards approaches his colleague and asks why he has been spacing out. The moment he notices Lee Hyun-seok and Han Sanga sparring, the poor man immediately complains, asking why nobody called him sooner. The two guards watch the duel like spectators with the best seats in the house. Although Han Sanga is clearly struggling, our protagonist notices that she is gradually beginning to keep up with his pace. To test her, he deliberately creates an opening after one of his attacks is blocked. Naturally, she notices it and immediately moves to exploit the opportunity. Unfortunately for her, the opening is nothing more than a feint. He is already launching another attack. This time, she quickly realizes there is no point overthinking the situation. Even though she sees the strike coming, she simply cannot dodge it. Thankfully, before the attack lands, the guard who had just arrived interrupts them. One of the rescued men has finally regained consciousness. His fellow guard sighs in disappointment, upset that the duel was interrupted just when it was getting interesting. Lee Hyun-suk is pleasantly surprised by the news. Meanwhile, poor Han Sanga quietly takes the opportunity to catch her breath. To her surprise, he suggests ending today's training. After all, this is only their first session. There will be many more, and each one will be even more difficult than the last. Soon afterward, they meet with the conscious hostage. The man explains that unless his eyes deceived him, he saw a truck arrive at the shrine. Several people stepped out. Both Lee Hyun-suk and Han Sanga are visibly surprised. When Han Sanga asks what he means, the survivor explains that those people were far too calm to be captives. More importantly, the monsters showed no hostility toward them. Instead, they actually helped them gather the hostages and load them into the truck. Hearing this, our protagonist finally realizes why they only found 7 survivors. He believes they were fortunate that some hostages managed to escape. Otherwise, confirming the survivor's story and rescuing the remaining captives would have been impossible. However, the man immediately corrects him. Nobody escaped. Han Sanga stares at him in disbelief when he reveals that the people from the truck intentionally let him go. Unlike her, our protagonist does not seem surprised in the slightest. His calm reaction immediately catches her attention. He asks whether she does not find it strange that an ordinary civilian managed to escape a horde of monsters, when even hunters struggled just to enter the area. That observation makes Han Sanga wonder if everything was nothing more than a trap. Unable to make sense of the situation, she turns toward him. Our protagonist clenches his fists in anger. He curses the people responsible for using such a despicable trick. His reaction leaves Han Sanga confused. She cannot tell whether he is angry because they underestimated him, or because they were willing to sacrifice innocent lives just to lure someone into a trap. Regardless, he asks the survivor whether he remembers anything else. The man hesitates before mentioning a cat. The group looks at him in confusion. Clarifying himself, he explains that one of the people from the truck had a cat mascot attached to their waist. The next scene shifts to another location. As they travel, Lee Hyun-seok wonders how Han Sanga figured out that the cat mascot the survivor described was actually connected to the airport. She simply points at his smartphone and asks whether he keeps it around as nothing more than decoration. Our protagonist innocently replies that the phone was expensive. Han Sanga is left completely speechless. She cannot help wondering whether this idiot has been living under a rock. or if he simply belongs to an older generation. Since they cannot find anyone, she is about to suggest searching the shrine once more. Before she can finish, our protagonist suddenly senses something. He tells her there is no need. He has already found exactly what they are looking for. The man standing before them has a face covered in piercings. Our protagonist cannot resist teasing him, asking if he stitched his face together with a sewing machine. Jokes aside, however, he immediately realizes that the person standing before them is anything but ordinary. The next scene reveals that the person with the piercings is actually a girl. She introduces herself as Kim Ji-yeon. The moment she mentions taking them alive, both our protagonist and Han Sang-ga exchange confused looks. Rather than explaining with words, Kim Ji-hyun decides it would be better to show them what she means. Without hesitation, she throws the man she had been holding into the corrosion rift. Han Sang-ga cannot understand why. What was the purpose of throwing an ordinary human into a corrosion rift? Normally, anyone thrown into a rift would be trapped inside until the core was destroyed from within. However, what happens next completely shatters everything she knows. The man who is thrown into the rift emerges as a corrosion monster. Surprisingly, Kim Ji-yeon looks irritated rather than pleased, clearly dissatisfied with the predictable result. Without another word, she casually kicks the undead monster, completely obliterating it. Meanwhile, our protagonist's group quickly pieces everything together. They realize that Kim Ji-hyun intends to turn them into corrosion monsters as well. When Han Sang-ga demands to know why, Kim Ji-hyun calmly explains that sacrificing ordinary people is only natural. Unfortunately, those sacrifices failed to produce satisfactory corrosion monsters. At that moment, our protagonist realizes the truth. They had been kidnapping people for this very purpose all along. Now everything makes sense, including why there were so many undead monsters. Kim Ji-yeon then explains that she personally does not care whether they know the truth, but the elder ordered her to reveal their plans for the sake of their great cause. She declares that they are the descendants of Dangun. Like any secret organization, they have gathered for a single purpose: to preserve and strengthen Korea's hegemony. As if to demonstrate her strength, she stomps the ground with enough force to send 2 cars into the air. She immediately leaps forward and kicks one of them straight toward the group. Seeing the car hurtling toward him, our protagonist can only sigh. With a single slash, he cuts the vehicle cleanly in half before asking what kind of nonsense Kim Ji-yeon is talking about. Why would they need to strengthen a country that is already powerful enough? In response, Kim Ji-hyun charges at him, declaring that Korea's current power is still not enough. Their organization exists to strengthen the nation until no one in the world dares to look down on it again. She tells him to think about the history of the Korean peninsula. Time and time again, the nation was forced to pay tribute, bow its head, and eventually lose its sovereignty. However, Lee Hyun-seok pays little attention to her speech. Instead, he focuses entirely on analyzing Kim Ji-yeon's fighting style. Although he successfully blocks her attack, the impact still sends him flying. Using that exchange to gauge her strength, he concludes that her power is manageable while admitting that she does have a point. He explains that Korea's position as the strongest nation today exists because of the corrosion rifts. If those rifts were to disappear, anyone could predict what would happen next. That means the descendants of Dangun have no intention of saving the world. He points out the countless lives that have already been ruined because of the corrosion rifts. Kim Ji-yeon simply replies that he has no idea what he is talking about. Lee Hyun-seok is genuinely surprised when she casually reveals that they have discovered a way to control the corrosion rifts. He immediately tells her to wait. If what she just said is true, then everything changes. If they can truly control the rifts, ordinary people would no longer have to suffer. To gather more information, he does something completely unexpected. He offers to hand over Han Sang-ga in exchange for more information, leaving the poor girl in shock. However, his interest quickly disappears when Kim Ji-yeon admits that they can only influence the rifts to a limited extent. They do not possess complete control over them. Hearing that, he mercilessly mocks their organization, calling them a group of bargain bin villains who genuinely believe their insane goal is righteous. That remark strikes a nerve. Furious, Kim Ji-yeon lunges at him while shouting for him to shut up. Our protagonist narrowly dodges the attack. Her attack slams into the ground, creating a massive crater. After putting some distance between them, he briefly wonders if he may have pushed her a little too far with his taunts. Of course, that was his plan all along. He was simply buying time for the mana stored inside his glove to recharge. With his current mana output, he cannot activate and maintain more of his black flames, so he has no choice but to drag the battle out. Just then, Kim Ji-yeon senses danger approaching. She barely avoids Han Sang-ga's surprise attack. The interruption annoys her. She had assumed Han Sang-ga was too frightened to join the fight. Han Sang-ga says nothing. Instead, she looks toward our protagonist. He immediately tells her that she cannot defeat Kim Ji-hyun. In response, Han Sang-ga simply points at his glove. He instantly understands. She intends to buy him enough time for it to finish recharging. Without hesitation, Han Sang-ga pulls out an elixir and asks how much time he needs. When he replies that 5 minutes will be enough, she drinks the entire bottle in one gulp. She tells him to leave everything to her. Concerned, he points out that she consumed far too much of the elixir. She simply replies that this is no longer the time to worry about something like that, since they only have one chance. He entrusts everything to her while he focuses on recharging his glove. Han Sang-ga fights without holding anything back. She attacks with such desperation that Kim Ji-hyun even jokes that she should take it easy, or she might accidentally kill her own teammate. In the next instant, however, it appears that Han Sang-ga's strike lands cleanly. For a brief moment, Han Sang-ga wonders if the battle is over. Unfortunately, Kim Ji-hyun remains completely unharmed. She casually dismisses the attack as nothing special. A powerful kick sends Han Sang-ga flying. Our protagonist catches her before she crashes into the ground. He gently sets her aside before turning toward Kim Ji-hyun. With an icy expression, he asks if she is ready to die. Kim Ji-hyun is stunned. In such a short amount of time, his mana has increased dramatically. She cannot help but ask if he had been hiding his true strength all along. After placing the unconscious Han Sang-ga somewhere safe, Lee Hyun-suk asks why she is so surprised. Once again, he mocks her piercings, causing her to frown in irritation. In reality, however, he has already noticed something unusual about them. Just like his glove, her piercings are deeply connected to mana. Kim Ji-hyun is confused by his explanation because she has no idea that Lee Hyun-seok can literally see the mana leaking from them. Thanks to that leakage, he has absorbed enough mana to use his black flames once again. She grows even angrier, unable to understand a single word he is saying. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun-seok has already appeared behind her. He calmly tells her that there is no point explaining any further, because she is about to die. This time, instead of using his signature 3-hit blue trajectory, he unleashes the full 15-hit combo. And just like that, Kim Ji-hyun is completely cooked, or rather burned, in this situation. Kim Ji-hyun suddenly feels something terribly wrong with her body. It feels as though her lungs have stopped working. She cannot breathe, nor can she even feel her own heartbeat. The only reason she remains standing is by forcing her body to move with mana. Noticing this, our protagonist looks at her in surprise. He explains that it is impressive she is still able to stand despite his black flames having burned away nearly all of her muscle strength. Desperate, Kim Ji-hyun cries out for her captain to save her. At that very moment, Lee Hyun-seok senses an incoming attack. Reacting instantly, he barely manages to block it at the last possible second. Seeing his defense, the man admits that he had intended to crush Lee Hyun-seok's wrist. He simply did not expect him to react in time. Even so, he praises Lee Hyun-seok for his sharp instincts. Our protagonist notices that the man's main weapon is a bow and wonders aloud if that attack was not a little excessive. Inwardly, however, he is carefully sizing him up. The captain is clearly no ordinary opponent. Judging from the overwhelming mana radiating from him, Lee Hyun-seok estimates that the man is at least 3 or 4 times stronger than Lee Se-in. Even so, he concludes that the captain was never trying to kill him. So he asks if the reason he spared him is because he is interested in his black flames. Meanwhile, Kim Ji-hyun feels the flames burning even more intensely. Unable to endure the pain any longer, she desperately begs her captain to save her. The captain turns toward Lee Hyun-seok and coldly orders him to extinguish the flames. He warns that he will not ask a second time. Lee Hyun-seok silently admits that the captain is far more impressive than he first thought. The only reason Kim Ji-hyun is still standing is because he is secretly supporting her body with his mana. Not to mention, if that earlier strike had targeted his head instead of his wrist, he believes he would already be dead. Having no better option, Lee Hyun-seok deactivates his black flames. The captain instantly disappears and reappears beside Kim Ji-hyun, catching her before she collapses. After examining her condition, he asks Lee Hyun-seok if he even understands what he has done to her. At first, Lee Hyun-seok remains silent. Eventually, he answers calmly. Her muscle strength is completely gone. She will spend the rest of her youth confined to a wheelchair with a catheter, and the only way her blood will continue circulating is through mana. Naturally, the captain is consumed by rage after hearing that. Although he originally had no intention of killing Lee Hyun-seok, he decides it no longer matters as long as he leaves him alive. Lee Hyun-seok refuses to back down. Instead, he openly challenges the captain to try killing him. The captain, however, ultimately halts his attack. The reason is simple. He still does not understand the principles behind Lee Hyun-seok's black flames. He explains that in the beginning, no one believed a corrosion rift could ever be controlled. Yet, despite those impossible odds, he alone succeeded in gaining control over one. Likewise, he swears that one day he will uncover the secret behind Lee Hyun-seok's flames as well. After making that declaration, he vanishes. Watching him disappear, Lee Hyun-seok realizes he has just provoked someone with some serious anger issues. Meanwhile, after regaining consciousness, Han Sang-ga walks over and asks if the captain was after his unique skill. Lee Hyun-seok nods. He admits that he has no idea why the man is so interested in it. Han Sang-ga then wonders why they did not take her hostage while she was unconscious. Lee Hyun-seok explains that they most likely performed a background check on her beforehand. Han Sang-ga points out that terrorists normally would not care about something like that. He agrees but tells her to think carefully about the descendants of Dangun's goals and objectives. He cannot imagine the Korean government openly opposing an organization with those ideals. In fact, he even suspects they might secretly be receiving support from the government itself. As Lee Hyunseok walks toward the corrosion rift, Han Sang-ga asks if he is planning to clear it, especially after the captain claimed he could control it. In response, Lee Hyunseok tells her to pretend today's incident never happened. When she admits she is terrible at keeping secrets, he teasingly says that he believes her. He suggests worrying about everything else later. For now, he intends to clear the corrosion rift alone. Concerned, Han Sang-ga asks if it is really safe for him to enter without any backup. After all, this is a Class 2 corrosion rift, nothing like the one he cleared on the island. After giving it some thought, Lee Hyun-seok still decides to enter by himself. He simply tells Han Sang-ga to use the opportunity to rest. The next scene shifts to the inside of the corrosion rift. Standing before him is a massive castle. For an undead castle, it is surprisingly solid. Aside from the overwhelming dark mana filling the area, he can clearly sense that the core of the rift lies beyond the enormous doors. As much as he hates to admit it, he knows he must remain cautious. If he lets his guard down for even a moment, he could die. Keeping that warning in mind, he steps inside the castle. There, he discovers a massive black cauldron. For a moment, he hesitates, wondering if this is truly the core of the rift he sensed earlier. Suddenly, someone grabs his ankle. Looking down, he sees a man desperately begging him for help. Before the man can say another word, something violently drags him away. Our protagonist quickly realizes that whatever is inside the cauldron has seized him. The moment the man is pulled into the black cauldron, silence fills the room. Not long afterward, he climbs back out. Only now, he has become an undead corrosion monster. Lee Hyun-seok finally understands how all the undead they have been fighting are created. The sight reminds him of his previous life as the hero. This is far from the first time he has witnessed innocent humans being sacrificed. Naturally, rage fills his heart. He curses the descendants of Dangun, calling them nothing more than disgusting humans. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted when a voice echoes through the chamber. Another sacrifice. Unlike those worthless humans, the mysterious voice says, "Our protagonist is strong. He possesses the spirit of a true warrior." The core of the corrosion rift takes his stance and tells our protagonist to prepare himself. Lee Hyun-seok can feel the monster's overwhelming pressure and wonders if this is truly a Class 2 core monster. He further wonders how on earth the hooded man managed to keep such a monster under control. However, he quickly dismisses that possibility. If this monster is actually stronger than the hooded man, then someone far more powerful must have been the one keeping it under control. Suddenly, the undead swordsman attacks. Our protagonist barely manages to dodge in time. Gritting his teeth, Lee Hyun-seok realizes the monster is unbelievably fast. Still, there is one method he has always relied on when facing an opponent like this. He must strike first before his opponent discovers his weakness. Unfortunately, the sword monster effortlessly blocks the attack. Lee Hyun-seok can hardly believe it. The monster blocks a strike unleashed with his maximum output. What shocks him even more is that he is so confident in his attack that he never even notices when the monster raises its sword to defend. He is still trying to process what just happened when the monster attacks again, catching him in the middle of his thoughts. The blow lands, leaving him with several injuries. Seeing him struggle, the monster admits that our protagonist is impressive. He had managed to avoid a fatal blow by shifting away from the vital point at the very last moment. The undead swordsman immediately follows up with a flurry of strikes, telling our protagonist to block them if he can. This time, Lee Hyun-seok suffers even more damage. Just like that, he drops to one knee. Unwilling to give up, our protagonist unleashes his black flames. He never expected to use his paradox flames this early in the battle. The problem is that the monster standing before him is an undead, making his black flames nearly useless against it. As he wonders how he is supposed to win this fight, the monster remarks that our protagonist is full of surprises. Curious, it suddenly vanishes. A moment later, it reappears behind him, leaving deep sword slashes across his back. Believing the battle is already over, the monster begins sheathing its sword, but at that very moment, our protagonist charges from behind, ready to strike. It turns out he survives the attack by healing himself with his black flames. Now that the monster has turned its back on him, he seizes the opportunity to launch a counterattack. Unfortunately, the monster is simply too fast. It effortlessly evades his strike and mocks him for being too slow. Even so, our protagonist quickly regains his footing. The monster admits that it did not expect him to recover so quickly and calls him a lucky bastard. In response, Lee Hyun-seok tells the monster to stop talking nonsense. It had deliberately held back at the last second, giving him enough time to recover. Lee Hyun-seok asks if that means the monster is merely toying with him out of pity. The undead swordsman's answer leaves him stunned. It explains that the old hymn would have finished our protagonist long ago, but now it cannot even remember its own name. Most of its memories have been lost. Those missing memories naturally leave gaps in its swordsmanship, and that is precisely why it was defeated by the man who tamed it. For a brief moment, Lee Hyun-seok almost feels sorry for the undead. Its body remains, but its memories are gone. In a way, its situation resembles his own reincarnation, yet it is also completely different. Meanwhile, the monster continues its lament. It admits that it has lost too much. It cannot even remember why it first picked up a sword. All that remains within it is resentment. As the monster speaks, our protagonist notices something is wrong. The pressure pouring from the undead continues to rise as its resentment grows, reaching an entirely different level. Even so, Lee Hyun-suk sees an opportunity. Recalling the undead's confession about the gaps in its memories and techniques, he realizes he is fighting only a fraction of the monster's true strength. If that is the case, then there is only one way to defeat this monster. He must pour everything he has into this battle and fight with his full power. The monster is surprised to see black flames engulf our protagonist's body, flames that not only heal his injuries, but also restore his energy. Curious, it remarks on our protagonist's peculiar ability, pointing out that the black flames seem to be burning something. Lee Hyun-suk admits the monster has a sharp eye. As already established, his black flames burn concepts and possess overwhelming destructive power. In this case, however, he explains that they are burning the concept of level. The greater the amount he burns, the more mana and control the black flames demand. That is why he made sure not to use too much of them during his fight against Kim Ji-yeon. Had he been careless, he could have burned away his own muscle strength as well. Of course, his former self never had to worry about such limitations. If his previous incarnation was a legendary greatsword, then his current self is nothing more than a fruit knife. With that, our protagonist places his hand on the ground and informs the monster that he intends to burn the building's durability. Puzzled, the undead swordsman asks what he is even talking about. Lee Hyun-suk does not bother explaining. In the very next moment, he suddenly appears before the monster and strikes. This time, the undead swordsman is unable to react in time. A smirk spreads across Lee Hyun-suk's face as he asks if the monster finally understands the situation. Unlike him, the monster has limits. Besides, he also wants to see just how far this body of Chanseok can be pushed. Noticing the building's unstable structure, the monster suggests taking the fight outside. From that moment onward, the battle becomes something straight out of Dragon Ball Z, growing more intense with every clash and exchange. The monster attacks and our protagonist blocks with his spear. The instant he notices the sword is about to slice through his weapon, he narrowly dodges at the last second. The undead swordsman immediately follows up by unleashing a sword technique known as slashed. The attack is so devastating that it cleaves entire mountains apart. Even so, the battle rages on. Lee Hyun-suk charges forward, activating his blue trajectory. The monster is struck several times, leaving it confused by the mysterious technique. Unfortunately for it, our protagonist is already closing in with another attack. This time, the monster suffers several more deep cuts. Enraged, the undead swordsman lets out a deafening roar before charging straight at our protagonist. Both fighters rush toward each other, unleashing their final strikes at the same time. The collision triggers a massive explosion. At that moment, Lee Hyun-suk recalls a conversation from his previous life. Once, a knight in his party had asked what he would do if he ever faced someone as strong as himself. His answer had been simple. If that day ever came, the outcome would be obvious. Only one of them would walk away alive. Back in the present, the monster slowly begins to disintegrate. As our protagonist watches its body crumble away, he remarks that, as expected, the one who wins is always the stronger one. The next chapter opens with our protagonist, watching the body of the undead swordsman slowly disintegrate. As expected, there is a reward for destroying the core of the corrosion rift. He comments that he is glad the reward appears the same way as it did in the previous corrosion rift. Opening the box, he discovers that his reward is a spear. However, it is unusually short, making him wonder if it should even be called a spear. Curious, he decides to test it. To his surprise, the spear extends in length. He admits it is quite impressive because it only does so when mana is infused into it. Our protagonist then remembers something important. It turns out that the rift provides rewards based on the number of people who clear it. If he had known that beforehand, he would have brought Han Sanga with him and simply kept her safe throughout the mission. Just then he notices the undead swordsman's weapon. Naturally, that immediately gives him an idea. Later, outside the rift in the real world, Han Sanga is resting peacefully. Our protagonist suddenly wakes her by tossing the sword he took from the rift toward her. Surprised to see him, she instinctively asks about the sword, adding that she has never seen one like it. Our protagonist casually makes up an excuse, claiming that he simply found it. She carefully inspects the blade, noting its exceptional quality and how well it has been maintained. This leaves her staring at him in shock, as she asks if he really obtained it from inside the rift. Unfortunately, our protagonist is in no condition to answer any more questions. He suddenly collapses from pure exhaustion. Unsurprisingly, Han Sanga had expected as much. News of our protagonist clearing a Class 2 corrosion rift alone spreads like wildfire. His face is plastered across every news channel and TV broadcast. As a newly famous hunter, his phone constantly vibrates with direct messages and notifications, making it impossible for him to use it for anything meaningful. Looking out from his hospital room and seeing the crowd of fans gathered outside, he realizes there is no way he can return home without attracting attention. At that moment, a woman wearing glasses enters the room and politely introduces herself as Ja Soo-jung from the Secretariat of Embargo Tower. Lee Hyun-suk welcomes her and thanks her for covering his medical expenses. However, he admits that he has never heard of their organization. She explains that they are not well known to the general public because their primary focus is the ICT industry. When she asks if he is feeling comfortable, he replies that he is, but there is something he is curious about. He knows that for an organization like theirs to personally visit him, it can only mean they want something from him. Without wasting any time, he insists that Ja Sujong get straight to the point. She smiles before offering him some dessert. The reason for her visit is a device called a shield generator. It is capable of generating a barrier-like shield to defend against corrosion monsters. Our protagonist is being offered a job to escort the device during its transportation, although Ja Sujong admits that it is still a prototype developed in the United States. If it can eventually be mass-produced successfully, it could save countless lives and bring relief to many people. Hearing the importance of the mission, our protagonist immediately concludes that it must be a large-scale operation. Ja Sujong confirms that he is correct. She explains that several hunters, more specifically the Janabi Guild, have already agreed to assist with the mission. That name alone makes him realize that the operation is far bigger than he initially expected. The shield generator will be transported by train after leaving Vladivostok. Once it arrives in the Netherlands, it will immediately be transferred by helicopter to Dover in the United Kingdom. When Lee Hyun-seok asks why they have to travel all the way to the United Kingdom, she explains that it is because of Ristorante, one of the Great Eight corrosion rifts. This rift is located in Naples, Italy, and its influence stretches across Europe and into North Africa. That is why they chose the United Kingdom. It is one of the few relatively safe locations, with the surrounding sea providing an additional layer of protection. She continues by explaining that Europe is currently in a state of anarchy. Many governments have failed to maintain order, allowing hunter guilds to seize control of various regions like warlords. In other words, our protagonist sums it up by saying that plenty of people will be trying to target them. As their conversation continues, Ja Sujong learns that this will be Lee Hyun-seok's first trip abroad. Our protagonist also realizes that Embargo Tower personnel will be accompanying the mission solely to gather information, and Ja Sujong believes she will be among those participating. Meanwhile, our protagonist quietly thinks to himself that the way she speaks makes it sound as though he has already accepted the mission. However, he finally agrees under one condition. Han Sang-ga must be allowed to join him. He explains that she is a trustworthy friend and that he made a promise to her. Seeing no issue with the request, Ja Sujong gladly accepts. Our protagonist extends his hand and the two shake hands to seal the deal. The tower even arranges a helicopter to transport him. Our protagonist admits that the treatment he receives after soloing a Class 2 corrosion rift is completely different from what he experienced after clearing a Class 3 rift. To his surprise, he comes face to face with the same old man he met before, who turns out to be the chairman of the Hunter Association. The old man praises him, saying he had already expected something like this from Lee Hyun-seok. Our protagonist thinks to himself that such recognition is only natural after proving his abilities. Even so, he wonders whether the old man knows about the descendants of Dangun. More importantly, if he does know, would he support their cause? The moment he boards the helicopter, he sees Lee Seon casually sitting inside, waiting for him. As they depart, the two discuss his rapidly growing popularity. During their conversation, our protagonist asks where they are heading. Puzzled yet curious, he wonders why they are flying to a military base. Lee Seon explains that the army will also be participating in the mission. Lee Hyun-seok already understands how important the operation is, but he realizes it holds an even greater significance for their country. At that moment, he brings up the descendants of Dangun and asks whether Lee Seon knows anything about them. In response, she calmly describes them as an ultranationalist terrorist organization. She is surprised that our protagonist even knows about them. He explains that he encountered members of the group during his previous mission. She goes on to explain that the organization is made up entirely of Koreans and that they mainly interfere with hunters during corrosion rift subjugation missions. Our protagonist agrees, adding that, based on his own experience, he believes he understands why they are doing it. Hearing that, Lee Seon casually tosses him a piece of candy. Of course, our protagonist still has no idea why she keeps throwing candies at him. Looking at him seriously, she asks whether he has any experience traveling overseas. Naturally, he answers no, all the while wondering why everyone keeps asking him the same question. She simply nods before saying that he will probably learn everything for himself, as this mission is about to make him realize many things. The next scene opens inside the military base, where a meeting is being held to discuss the operation. The man in charge of briefing everyone on the mission is Major General An Hunzo. He begins by explaining that the train carrying them is an 80-car train. 64 cars will be used for cargo and other essential supplies, while the remaining cars are reserved for the hunters participating in the mission. From the explanation, our protagonist realizes that Lee Seon will have an entire car to herself. It is the kind of treatment expected for an S-rank hunter, and the 10th strongest hunter in the world. Since the Embargo Tower has delegated the protection of the shield generator to the Janabi Guild and the accompanying hunters, Major General An Hunzo suggests allowing military personnel to share the burden of guarding it, especially considering the long journey and the fatigue the hunters are expected to face. The moment the idea is mentioned, Lee Si-eun immediately rejects it. She explains that because her guild is responsible for protecting the shield generator, it will naturally become the primary target for anyone planning an attack. Surely, the Major General already understands that. In the end, she firmly declares that no one except the hunters of the Janabi Guild is allowed to approach the generator. Her statement leaves the entire room speechless. The Major General does not argue and simply suggests they move on. With her permission, he continues explaining the potential threats they are likely to face. Since the train will pass through numerous corrosion zones, there are 7 specific locations where corrosion rifts pose a significant danger. On top of that, there are bandits roaming the Siberian region who could also become a threat. Hearing that, Lee Si-eun cannot help but joke that the report sounds like the plot of an action movie. Although letters have been sent to the warlords across Europe, only 3 of them have responded. Our protagonist immediately assumes that the rest have chosen to become their enemies. Everyone in the room, including him, shares the same thought. They cannot help but wonder how they are supposed to deal with corrosion rifts, warlords, and bandits during a 2-week journey. At this point, calling the mission impossible would not be an exaggeration. However, Lee Si-eun calmly tells everyone not to worry, instantly silencing the room. She reassures them that no matter what happens, she will make sure the train reaches its destination safely. The next scene shifts to Vladivostok, Russia. There, everyone assigned to the mission begins heading toward their designated train cars. Our protagonist walks toward the first-class carriage, though he did not expect the distance to be so long. Just then, he hears a familiar voice. Realizing it is Han Sanga, he remarks that she arrived just in time. She points out that he did not forget his promise. Since he kept his word, she has decided to fulfill her side of the deal by bringing him an elixir the next time they meet. However, when he asks why he never saw her earlier, she explains that she traveled in the luxury first-class carriage, so naturally their paths never crossed. He figures the same must also be true for Lee Si-eun. As expected of a world-class hunter, the treatment she receives is on an entirely different level. Meanwhile, Ja Soo-jong approaches and comments on the operation. Turning to Lee Hyun-seok, she asks if he has taken a good look at the train. He tells her that he just arrived and never had the chance to inspect it, but now that he is seeing it up close, he has to admit the tower put a tremendous amount of effort into its construction. To him, the train is nothing less than an ironclad fortress. When he wonders if such heavy security is actually dangerous, because it makes them stand out so much, she shakes her head. On the contrary, while the train may be conspicuous, it is built from the same material used for armored military vehicles. Our protagonist nods in understanding. After all, with a hunter like Lee Si-eun on board, unless something truly disastrous happens, nothing should go wrong. The train has barely departed when it suddenly comes under attack from corrosion monsters. One of the hunters immediately calls for backup from anyone available. Lee Hyun-seok heads over while inwardly complaining. It has only been 10 minutes since their departure, yet they are already being attacked by endless waves of monsters. He keeps cutting them down, but more continue to appear. At that moment, he can only think how much easier this would be if Lee Si-eun were fighting alongside them. Currently, large sections of the Trans-Siberian Railway are damaged. For the train to continue moving, railway repairs must be carried out while the operation is still in progress. Since the personnel repairing the tracks cannot defend themselves, someone has to protect them. That is where Lee Si-eun comes in. However, our protagonist cannot help but think the plan is incredibly inefficient. Why keep someone as powerful as her tied down to a defensive role where she cannot unleash her full strength? Just then, another wave of monsters appears. Our protagonist lets out a sigh. It is going to be a very long day. Elsewhere, a man casually drags what appears to be an unconscious shark-like monster behind him. When he notices someone waiting for him, he asks in Russian what the man is doing there. At that very moment, the monster suddenly wakes up and lunges at him. In the next second, its head is blown clean off. The hunter greets the man before him as Lee Hae-eun, commenting that it is a pain when he shows up without saying a word. Nonetheless, Lee Hae-eun replies in Russian that it has been a while before adding that he came to offer the man a job. The man is revealed to be the ruler of Khabarovsk, Nikolai Baranov. Upon learning that the shark monster was actually Nikolai's dinner, Lee Hae-eun is genuinely surprised. However, Nikolai quickly shifts the conversation back to the job, reminding him that he does not work for money. Lee Hae-eun comments that this is exactly what makes Nikolai so interesting. He then reveals that a train which recently departed from Vladivostok will be passing through the region in 2 or 3 days. Hearing this, Nikolai assumes Lee Hae-eun is lying since the Trans-Siberian Railway has long been damaged. Lee Hae-eun explains that not every awakened individual specializes in killing monsters. Some possess abilities that allow them to repair damaged structures. Hearing that, Nikolai concludes that they must be repairing the railway while the train is moving. When he asks what the train is carrying, Lee Hae-eun tells him that the cargo is not what matters. What matters is who is riding the train. Nikolai is visibly shocked when he hears that the candy lady of the Yanabi Guild, Lee Si-eun, will be aboard. Of course, the very thought of robbing a train protected by Lee Si-eun immediately excites him. However, Lee Hae-eun quickly corrects him, silently calling the man an idiot. They are not robbing the train, nor are they supposed to damage it. His assignment is simply to breach the train and connect the terminal he is holding to the equipment stored inside. Once that is done, he is free to do whatever he wants with the cargo. Nikolai's eyes light up with excitement as he immediately accepts the job, with a bloodthirsty grin. He declares that he will not only destroy the cargo, but also kill and slaughter every hunter on board right in front of Lee Si.